Juan here actually figured prominently in the seasonal tactics DVDs that he helped me film, and he helped teach a lot of those the presentations, the seasonal specific presentations. We have the river smallmouth fall patterns and river smallmouth summer patterns, and so you can see Juan's one of my experts on there. And some of what you're going to talk about is on this DVD right here. I'll let you take it from there.
A lot of what I'm going to talk about actually is going to almost be the exact opposite of what Jeff talked about, because he talked about high, muddy water, and now we're going to tone things down a bit and talk about low, clear water that you typically would experience here in the Northeast, July, August, early September. Really, I think the first thing is your approach has to be a little bit different. It's got to be more stealthy. I know when I'm throwing a spinnerbait in muddy water, I get right up by the trees and just chuck it and wind it. And so there are a couple rules that I have for low, clear water. Is number one, your approach. You have to make long casts, okay? So you got to try to maximize your casting with your equipment, and I'll talk a little bit about the equipment I use to maximize my long casts. The other thing you need to do is be really in tune with the position of your kayak and what kind of commotion you're causing or not causing on the water. So typically, instead of doing a full out paddle, when I'm moving up on a spot, I'm just nice and quiet in the water with my paddles, trying to be as stealthy as I can. And I try not to approach fish from upstream, downstream. I try to find a way to come in behind spots that I want to target. So if I can slide by a spot by moving along the bank and slide up into an area and face that area from behind, that's better in low, clear water. Sometimes that's not possible at all. You just have to wing that bait out there to those targets that you see out in front of you. It could be little eddy pools or spots behind rocks where the fish might be holding. Now, as far as making those long casts and equipment, my favorite really is a 7.5 foot medium light rod to be able to do that. The longer length, I think, gives you a little bit of casting distance. A lot of times with these finesse baits I'm going to talk about in a minute, being able to pick up a lot of slack line is important too, because a lot of times you're fishing these things on you're dead sticking it on what I call a semi-slack line. You don't have that tight connection like you do with a tube or a crankbait or something like that. You've got a little bit of slack in that line. So my setup is a 7.5 foot medium light, because I can cast these really light baits that I'll talk about in a minute. You see how small this is? Okay, I can cast them a long way. The other thing I do is to increase sensitivity is use braid, but I also put a leader on. This is a 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, and I do that because of the water clarity. You notice that Jeff is fishing muddy water. He had a lot of stuff tied directly to his braid. Because of the clear water, especially with river smallmouth, I like to go to a leader that's somewhat invisible. I'm going anywhere from 3 foot out to 7 foot sometimes, depending on the lure that I use. I'm not going to get into a lot of that detail. Now, the baits that I'm going to use, color. Jeff talked about color. I use a simple template when I'm thinking about color and water conditions. When you're muddy, you're going to those more contrasting, deeper, darker colors. When you're clear water, you're really going to appeal to the fish's eyesight, especially smallmouth. They are sight feeders. They prefer to feed by sight. And so in that clear water, you want natural colors. So you can see here, these greens, if you look at the bait fish out on the Susquehanna and the Juniata River, these hues of green, browns I've got here. This actually has a crawfish color that's designed for the Susquehanna River. This is called a creek wacky worm. It's one of my favorite baits in low, clear water. I've had this bait on guiding trips where I'm out there for 2 hours hacking away at fish, and we throw this thing on there, and all of a sudden it's like all of a sudden where there weren't fish, all of a sudden there are fish. It's a great finesse presentation. Typically what I'll do with this bait is dead stick it. I'll cast it out into a spot I think might hold fish. Maybe it's a little eddy behind a rock. Maybe it's the head of a pool. Maybe it's the push water. And that's another great reason to use these weightless baits like this, because in push water, you ever get tangled and snagged on the bottom in push water all the time, because it's where the water comes up and then it riffles out again. These kind of baits are awesome because they're hard to get snagged on the bottom. I've got this thing rigged on an octopus sickle hook. It's a size 6, and it's got, you can see the creek wacky worm, which is made by Winko's Custom Lures. That's one of my sponsors. He puts a ring on there, okay? And this thing is heavy enough that you can cast it a pretty good distance with the right setup. With this particular setup, I can cast a long way and get it out there to the fish. Now, when I cast a bait like this in low, clear water, I usually want less action is better, especially for bigger fish. Big fish, think of them as lazy, okay? Big fish are lazy. They're big for a reason. They're big because they feed opportunistically. Those 10-inch fish, you ever notice how they chase everything? You're reeling stuff in and they're all over it. Do you ever see a big fish do that? You do sometimes, but not as frequently, right? They're not as actively feeding, but they'll take food as an opportunity. So this is an opportunity for a fish to feed. This is one of the baits that I use. Another bait that I use in low clear water that doesn't have as much action is a 3-inch stick worm. And this one is made by Winco's Custom Lures as well. The reason I like this one, you see how small this thing is? And it's pretty flexible too. He plays around with this plastic, and this 3-inch bait will cast farther than almost any 3-inch bait on the market. You look at this thing and you say, how far could this thing cast? It'll cast farther than that wacky worm. It'll cast like a bullet out there. And again, I'm nose hooking it, okay, with a sickle hook. Again, I'm throwing it into pockets and areas, slack water areas where the fish might be feeding, holding behind rocks and boulders and so forth, and the fish will pick it up. The cool thing about these hooks is that they're extremely sticky, and so when they pick this thing up, and they're just going to come up and suck it up, and those big fish typically don't run, they're just kind of move off with it, and you'll see your line going. That's one of the reasons I use this braid too, is because you can see that jump. You know, like a strike indicator on your fly rods, it's like that. You'll see a little bit of a jump, and you'll see some ripple coming off of your line. That usually indicates that something sucked this bait up, and that's how I tell. I'll cast it out, and I'll just dead stick it. I'll let it lay there. I'll let it lay there. I'll let it lay there, and I'll talk to Jeff a little bit, and I'll let it lay there. And then I'll let it lay there some more. It's almost nerve-wracking how long you can leave it sit, but that's what the big fish want. That's what the big fish want. They'll sit there and stare it down. I've seen video of the fish just staring it down. Am I going to eat that or not? Am I going to eat that or not? And then I'll just move in, suck the bait up, and move off. Okay, and you'll see that tick in your braid that's laying on top of the water because it floats. Okay, so this is a great bait for low clear water. I've caught a lot of really big fish on this. We're talking citation size smallmouth bass, 20 inches or more. And again, my colors here. One thing I don't have on this one is I like a chartreuse tip sometimes. That's just a personal preference. I think it adds a little bit more of a, hey, what's that? You know what I mean? It kind of appeals to the fish a little bit more. Another finesse bait I use in low clear water is this creek darter that Winco's makes. This is a solid body, and I like it because it has a really great sink rate to it. And what I typically do with this is I'll rig it on this size 4 sickle hook. It's a Matsuo sickle hook, and instead of rigging it down or up, I'll rig it across, and that tends to be a little bit less snaggy. So the top of the bait's right here, and I'll rig it across the nose. Okay, and it doesn't affect hookups either. Okay, so it's not going to affect your hookup. And you can see now I've got a really nice presentation. It's just kind of a minnow, and I can do a lot of things. I like this bait a lot because this bait, this soft stick bait, is really versatile. I can do a lot of things with it. I can fish it like those other baits and just cast it out into a little pool, a little spot behind a rock, and just you see how far that thing casts. And I can just let it sit there like this, and see how my line's floating right there? So I'm going to watch that line. I'm just going to sit here, okay? Watch that line. Sit here a while. Eat a sandwich. Watch the line. And then I'll pick it up. So I'm almost fishing it like bait. Okay, and then I'll throw it to another target. All right? So another thing you can do with this bait too is, let's say in low clear water, sometimes I'll make that long cast, and I can twitch it a little bit too. So sometimes the fish want a bit of a twitch on that bait. And so I might just let it sink, twitch it a couple times just like that, and then just let it set. So that's another presentation. And a lot of times that twitch, when they want something moving a little bit like that, and then you do this, that's when they hit right after that twitch. You'll see a flash in the water, and that fish will be on that. And you'll see that again, that kind of ripple going out from your line. And you notice my line, I'm fishing on a pretty slack line there, okay? I'm fishing it like bait. So that's a second way that I can use a soft stick bait like this. Another way to use a soft stick bait is to skitter it on top. And this is when the fish are really active. I find that when you have a lot of cloud cover on a day when the water's clear, but then you get that cloud cover coming in, it might be about ready to rain. That's usually whenever this is a pretty good retrieve. So I'll cast it out, and kind of like Jeff does with the buzzbait, right away I'm just doing this. See this? I'm skittering it, and a lot of times I'll have fish following, or I'll see them blow up on it, and then I'll kill it. As soon as I get a blow up, a lot of times I'll just kill it. Sometimes I'll be able to hit it on the run like that, but this is an excellent presentation in low clear water. You're talking 3-4 foot of water, the fish are holding in it. there's nothing more fun. I'm gonna do that again. There's nothing more fun than doing this with your bait. You see that? I closed the bail and seeing that boom, 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 boom. You know, I think on the summer DVD there's a shot of one of Jeff's guide clients that's just like that. It's like boom, 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 and he's just laughing, and that thing's like plop, 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 chasing that bait down. But sometimes they really want that. I mean, they really want it. What I do sometimes, and this is something you've got to do too as a fisherman, take cues from the fish. Let's say that I dead stick this thing out there, okay, and I'm gonna get, you gotta take cues from the fish. Let's say I dead sticked it out there, right? And I'm like, oh, there's nothing there, and I start reeling it in. And all of a sudden I see a fish follow or it strikes it. What does that just told me? I can say, oh boy, that was interesting. Or I can say, hey, maybe I better move the bait. Maybe I better move that bait, okay? And so that's when I might start doing some twitching, or I'll go to that full out, you know, just skittering it on top of the water. When I start to see that kind of stuff, when I see that fish actively chasing something, then I'm going to switch gears because I know the fish are actively feeding at that time, okay? Especially when I see a big fish doing that, you know the fish are on. So these are 3 baits again. You know, you got your 3-inch stick worms in low clear water. You got your creek wacky worms. It's about a 3.5-inch bait, and this very versatile bait, the soft, soft creek darter that Al Winko makes, Custom Lures. It's a fantastic bait. I was on the Juniata in the fall with these too, and you can do the same thing in the fall. It's low clear water. In the fall we're fishing, and I had a client. I mean, like, we had to kept saying, let's go down river. We're catching we were like fishing on a spot for like 2 hours catching fish. It's like, let's go down river. You know, we got a whole 5 hours to go, or 5 miles to go. So this is a great presentation for low clear water. Now, another thing you're going to need to do though in low clear water is fish deeper water. These are great baits, these unweighted soft plastics. They're great baits for, I would say, like 4, maybe 5 feet of water. I'm really patient. I can probably get them down to 6 or 8 if I really have to, you know what I mean? But when you're talking deeper water, deep runs with current, where the fish might be holding. Let's say they're holding at the top of a pool, and you know that. You've been catching most of your fish at the top of the pool, so that's your pattern, okay? And it's like 6, 8 feet deep, but there's current pushing through there. It's gonna be a little bit harder to get some of these baits down. Maybe that creek darter, because it's solid body, it's a little heavier, you could do that. But I'm gonna put this down, okay? The fish might be feeding down there. They feed on crayfish a lot, smallmouth at least, in rivers. And so I'll switch up to the crayfish. One of the things that I do with my crayfish, and it actually is contrary to what a lot of guys do, and so I'm going to let you in on one of my tricks here, is that I want crayfish with the claws down when I'm in the summertime. And I'll tell you why. I grew up catching crayfish all my life and fishing with crayfish as a kid, and soft shell crayfish do this right there. You see that? So I get mine poured with salt in them. All right, this is a Winko Predator Crawl. This accounted for almost every fish we caught on the Devil's River of the 200. Like the largest portion of the 200 we caught on the Devil's River. This bait in Texas, and it works great here too. I've caught a lot of big fish. Basically, this is a Winko Predator Crawl with a flutter head. It's highly snag resistant. I think I've had this thing tied on. I used it for 4 days in a row on the Devil's River, and that thing is rock and sandstone. You see, I wore off the paint, but guess what? I never lost the bait. 4 days of fishing, same bait. How many tubes do you lose in a day? A ton. How many fish took it? How many fish? Well, not this plastic. I had to change it out. We caught about 200 fish on a 4-day trip. So I caught anywhere from like 15 to 25 fish a day. And so most of the fish came on this. We caught, buzz baits and spinner baits and so forth. The last thing I want to talk to you about in terms of clear, low water is spinner baits, and a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy. I fish spinner baits all the time in all water conditions. And think about when you're running a river, especially. That's where I guide a lot, on the Susquehanna Juniata River. You're going to encounter a lot of different types of water, and so you might have a good pattern of throwing this wacky this wacky worm at the end of pools in the push water. So that's your solid pattern for the day. But you're going to go past a lot of rock gardens, a lot of chutes and things like that, where water's shooting through the rocks or through ledges. And so that's where this bait comes in a lot of times. I love to throw this thing up into chutes. And this is a smaller spinner bait. Again, low clear water, we're going to downsize a little bit, more subtle presentation. We don't need to have, the clackers on there and stuff like that, that we might need to do in muddy water. So I've got some very simple, 2 blades on there, a gold and a silver. And so you can see that I can never make up my mind which one's better, gold or silver. So I just did both. and every one of my spinner baits, you look at my box, they're all the same. And in my world, there are really two colors of spinner baits in my whole world. All right, there are chartreuse spinner baits with gold blades, and there are chartreuse spinner baits with silver blades. Those are the two colors in my world. I'm kind of lying. I have black for dark water, and I have you know, some white ones in there too. But I like chartreuse a lot for smallmouth. So this is 3/16. It's a more subtle presentation, smaller profile bait. Okay, and so I can throw that in those chutes. You know, let's say this is a big rock, and we've got water chute here coming down this side, a nice current. We've got an eddy right here. You know, I could throw this in the eddy right here, and that would be great. But what I typically do is I'll typically throw it out in the chute, and I'll make that fish make a decision about heading it. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to make that fish make a decision. If I throw it here, I'm throwing it on top of the head. In my world, that's not very good, especially in low clear water. So I'll throw it out in the chute, and I'll bring it down the chute and then angle it in to the slack water. Okay, so I'm hitting specific targets, and I might do that 2 or 3 or 4 times along different edges of that current seam right there. Okay, and then I'll hit the other side. I like to bring my spinner baits from fast water to slack water. Fast water, slack water. I will rarely say, oh, look at that great pocket, there's a fish there, and cast right on top of that fish. In low clear water, that's the worst thing you can do. You guys trout fish, and you guys trout fish grow up in Pennsylvania, what's the worst thing you can do? Cast right on top of the fish, right? That's not what I want to do. I want to put that out there in that chute, and I want to put that thing right in its face and make it make a decision. Am I going to eat today or not? Okay, am I going to eat today or not? So I do that a lot with my spinner baits. Another trick I have with my spinner baits is I always use a trailer. And you know, these are white grubs on the ones I have now, just because that's the kick I'm on. So that's my spinner baits in low clear water. So as I'm going down a river, I hit the beginning of a hole. I might throw that predator crawl in there 6 or 8 feet deep, and I'll fish that, see if I get anything. Then I'm going down to the, you know, through the middle section. You know, I could throw a variety of things in there, and then I hit the tail end. I might throw some of that finessey stuff, and then I hit a rock guard or some lead chutes, and I'm throwing my spinner bait. So a lot of times I'm cycling through 2 or 3 different baits in a day to make use of the water that's in front of me. Even though I might have a really strong pattern, okay, I might have a really strong pattern in one particular area, I'm still going to try to fish the other areas, at least make some casts and catch some extra fish. You know, you want to catch as many as you can when you're out there, right? Maximize your time on the water. Maximize the time that your bait's in the water too. And by having different baits ready to go, you can always accomplish that.
To learn all of Juan's top summer river smallmouth patterns, get a copy of this DVD available at confidencebaits.net.